Oh man. We're live. We're live. I guess we're doing this. Guess we're doing this again. Guess give me some space up here at the top. Let's see. Here we go. I'm more in the middle. I am more in the middle. All right. 3:02. I'm on time. I am on time, and I'm getting better. I'm getting better at this. I'm getting better at being on time and doing this stuff in a timely manner. But yeah. Um, Welcome, guys. Thank y'all for coming out. Thank y'all for coming out. I'm doing this, and this is like the third time that I've gone live on my channel. This is introductions. This is Michael Motley from the One My Black History podcast. I also kind of go by Country Boy. I don't know if I made any formal introductions because I usually don't do this sort of thing. I usually don't go live, just kind of put out videos and go about my day. But as far as like formal introductions, of course, my name is Michael Motley. I started down this journey around 2020. Basically, I was doing a cut. If you search back far enough into my YouTube history, some of those videos are still up. But around 2020, I thought that maybe we could do something different. Maybe I could try to do something that offered value. I felt that there was a lack of Black history channels that were coming from my perspective. I had saw larger channels do stories on Black history, but they didn't look like us. They didn't look like us, and I thought it was definitely a market for the Black history told by us, kind of like FUBU. And that kind of embarked me down this journey a bit. I don't come from a place where I have a formal education in Black history, even though I read a lot. But this is a bit of a learning project for me as well as for you guys. I go and research, and over the 4 years, I've kind of become an expert on the subject. But I didn't start that way, so it's kind of initiative to learn more and to be more. So that I could be more, and then I can kind of teach people and learn as we go along and embark on this journey to learn more about history, American history, but specifically our history. Black history is American history, right? So today's topic is we're going to talk about the Freedom Summer murders, or My Burn, Mississippi Burning. Of course, there was a movie on the subject, but the anniversary of the Mississippi Burning murders was June 21st, 1964. That was the other day. I talked about it a little bit on my Substack, which you can see that up here in the corner. But today we're just going to go in depth. I'm going to talk about the background, a little bit of it, and then I'm going to go into what happened and the history of it. And then afterwards, we're going to just shoot the shit for a little bit, see where that takes us. If you got any questions, what's up, brother? Oh, yeah. You got a question? Go ahead and ask it. I haven't even gotten started yet. Haven't even got started yet. Where is this joint? I'll circle back because I'm gonna cover this up, and I'm not gonna be able to see it. So yeah, we're gonna talk about the Mississippi Burning murders, and then we're gonna circle back, and I'll answer this question once I get through it. So in the summer of 1964, civil rights activists from the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee and the Congress for Racial Equality had joined forces to launch a nonviolent effort to desegregate Mississippi's political system. To achieve this, they recruited hundreds of college students from the northern parts of the United States. And these students worked with the Mississippi's local Black residents to register, to work in Mississippi to help the Black folks register to vote, and they did other things like create freedom schools and freedom libraries, and also launched their own political party. But to kind of understand this, you need to go back a little bit, because before the civil rights legislation, America was a breeding ground for racial segregation and discrimination, and most profoundly in the southern United States. Mississippi epitomized this more than most, whereas racial segregation and political subjugation defined the lives of Black folks. Their voices and political influence was choked off by voting discrimination. Despite the 15th Amendment in 1870, which assured Black folks the right to vote, politicians manipulated legal gaps to impose discriminatory practices. This was effectively reduced that Black vote in Mississippi to basically nothing. This was done with literacy tests and poll taxes and intimidation, which all became tools to disenfranchise the Black voting population. These practices even excluded Black folks from serving on juries due to Jim Crow laws. And despite constitutional challenges, when such practices were ruled unconstitutional, states initiated new methods to prevent us from being able to vote, such as white primaries and grandfather clauses. This bleak reality bred the civil rights movement, which until the early 60s was driven by mostly local initiatives. However, it became apparent that a broader strategy was needed to dismantle this system of prejudice. Consequently, in Mississippi, they created what was called the Council of Federated Organizations, which was started in 1962. It was a amalgamation of four major civil rights groups: the NAACP, the the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and CORE, and the SCLC. This marked a shift in the movement because they hadn't really worked together, and they were set to dive in and battle things on a national level. Particularly they were working in Alabama and Mississippi. You see this a lot in both of those states. So their primary goal was to confront voter discrimination with a larger mission of eliminating political and economic and social disparities by nonviolent means. It was a belief that this multifaceted civil rights campaign involving voter registration, education, and community organizing in Mississippi, and this approach was aimed to dismantle this deeply embedded system of racial bias. The efforts culminated in what was known as the Freedom Summer Campaign, which was a flagship undertaking of the civil rights movement. It attracted hundreds of volunteers from all across the country that flocked to Mississippi to register Black people to vote. One of the keys to the Freedom Summer's success was the recruitment, particularly focusing on northern colleges and universities. Basically, they recruited white people. They recruited young white people as a strategic mode to kind of draw in the public and draw in media attention. And the training of volunteers was extremely important because they had to prepare them for what it was going to be like when they went down to Mississippi. They would give them intense training and then encourage them to read a few books like Dr. King's Stride Towards Freedom and Lillian Smith's Killers of a Dream. However, the initiatives faced intense opposition, mostly coming from white supremacists like the Ku Klux Klan, particularly in places like Mississippi, where activists, regardless of race, faced bombings, beatings, and were the targets of shootings. This created an atmosphere of fear and disencouragement. I think in preparation for the Freedom Summer Project, the Klan alone swelled to almost 10,000 members. So they were preparing themselves for an invasion. They had been told there were going to be an invasion of white students, and they had swelled their resources to prepare for that invasion. That brings us to 1964, when at the time, the Ku Klux Klan had burned down more than 20 Black churches in Mississippi. So on the Memorial Day of that year, Michael Schwerner and James Chaney had given a speech at the Mount Zion Methodist Church in Longdale, Mississippi, encouraging the congregation to register to vote and inquire about setting up a freedom school. Freedom schools were like extracurricular schooling that would focus on political engagement, Black history. Typically that would happen during the summertime, but in addition to freedom schools, they also had freedom libraries where you could go and get books on Black history and also read banned authors and things that were outside the mainstream. Think like, the Little Red Book from Mao Zedong. Um, However, the Klan found out about Michael Schwerner's voting drive and formulated a plan to impede their progress. They attacked the congregation and set the church on fire in a calculated attempt to draw out these activists to Neshoba County. However, Michael Schwerner wasn't in Mississippi at the time. He had gone to Ohio to train a group of Freedom Summer volunteers. When he got back to Mississippi, the civil rights activists Michael Schwerner, Andrew Goodman, and James Chaney visited the destroyed Mount Zion Church. They were stopped by law enforcement who knew their car because because they had written it down as an Associated Corps car, Congress of Racial Equality car. Chaney, the driver, was pulled over and charged with driving 65 in a 35-mile-an-hour zone. Michael Schwerner and Schwerner and Goodman were held for investigation and taken to the Philadelphia jail in Neshoba County. By 4:45 p.m., the trio was when they had not returned, Corps staff called the nearby jails and police stations, but couldn't learn anything. In Philadelphia, though, despite the fact that the fines for speeding were posted directly on the wall, Neshoba County Sheriff Cecil Price refused Michael Schwerner's request to make a phone call and inform the three men they would have to remain in the jail till the justice of the peace arrived to process their fines. Afterwards, he returned to the jail, and when he returned to the jail at 10 p.m., he came back without the justice of the peace, collected their fines, and told them they had to leave the county. They were never seen again after that point. On June 23rd, 1963, the FBI launched an inquiry into the suspicious disappearance of the activists in Neshoba County. They would call the case My Burn, which was short for Mississippi Burning. And this is where the name of the movie came from the case, from the FBI's case name. The investigation faced numerous roadblocks from the jump. The local police and the public were deeply steeped in racism and displayed outward hostility towards the agents. The police in particular were completely uncooperative and suspected of having aided in the killings. This forced the FBI to have to bring in agents from across the county for the investigation. Overcoming these challenges was further complicated by the absence of a central FBI office in Mississippi, the only state without one at the time. Because of course. Early in the investigation, the torch vehicle of the victims was discovered in a swamp, confirming their suspicions of foul play. After days of searching with no clues or whereabouts, the FBI had to consider that the activists had been murdered. Assistance from the Naval Reserve sought to dredge rivers for potential bodies. The remains of the activists were then found horribly disfigured and after 44 days, buried in an earthen dam on the property of a known white supremacist and local businessman known by the name of Olin Burridge. All the while, this case continued to gain national traction, largely due to the glaring racial undertones of the two victims, Michael Schwerner and Andrew Goodman. They were white people from the North. FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover, who was initially hesitant, was prompted to get involved following persuasion from then President Lyndon B. Johnson. He basically told he had to. And there was a little, I don't know if this talked about it, but there was a heavy suspicion that the only reason anyone cared about this case is because there were two white people involved. And that had all three of those activists been black, the FBI wouldn't have shown up and they would have never been found. And there's some evidence to that, because while they were looking for the bodies of the three activists, they found the remains of at least 8 black men while looking for the 3 other activists. Throughout the fall of 1964, the FBI, while they can pursue the investigation, undeterred by the lack of cooperation from the state and local government, given their refusal to even though they knew who was primarily involved, the state of Mississippi refused to prosecute the killers for murder. Because this crime was covered by state law, the Justice Department decided to charge 21 men for conspiring to violate the civil rights of Schwerner, Chaney, and Goodman. The prosecutors for the federal government brought these charges to a grand jury, which indicted Sheriff Lawrence Rainey, Deputy Sheriff Cecil Price, and 16 other men in the January of 1965. The following month, in February February 24th, 1965, federal judge William Herrick Cox, who was a ardent segregationist, because who wasn't in Mississippi at the time, dismissed the charges against the majority of the defendants on the ground that the other 17 had not been acting under the color of state law. Basically, the abuse of power by an official because he is an official. The 16 others, because they weren't law enforcement officials, could not be charged the same way as the two law enforcement officials. That's basically what he's saying. So Sheriff Rainey and Cecil Price kept their charges while everybody else got their stuff dismissed. Prosecution appealed. In 1966, the Supreme Court reinstated the charges, ruling that the law applied to both law enforcement officials and civilians. In October of 1967, the state versus Cecil Price began in the courtroom with Judge William Herrick Cox. The jury consisted of 7 white men and 5 white women, as defense attorneys had to exercise their challenges against all 7 black jurors. So they did have the possibility to have black jurors, but they dismissed all of them because of reasons. Because of course they did. On the first day of the trial, the defense attorneys asked the witness if Swerner, who had been part of a plot to rape white women during the Freedom Summer Project, and Judge Harold Cox immediately deemed this question to be improper and declared that I'm not going to make a farce out of this trial. This was a turning point in this trial. This is the moment where the defendants realized that this was not going to be this was not a slam dunk. They could go to jail. They could really go to jail. This was a real trial. This was serious. This had gotten serious. You know, there's a quote from Samuel Bowers where he talks about after killing Fernie Dahmer that there was not a jury in Mississippi that would convict a white man for the murder of a nigger in Mississippi. It's basically what he said. And they fully believe that. During the 1960s, when a black person was killed, it's totally possible in Mississippi or Alabama or any places in that area that you would be charged and that you would go to trial. But there was this idea that you would never go to jail. And if you did go to jail, it would not be for very long. You weren't going to get the same. They didn't hold, like, even if you look at Emmett Till, they talked to one of the jury members, and he mentions that we believe that they were guilty, but life imprisonment did not feel like the right recourse for the murder of a black man by a white man. That was basically their idea. So when Judge Harold Cox told them that this is not going to be a farce, it's basically telling them, y'all can go to jail. This is dead serious. Y'all need to take this. You need to take this seriously. So during the trial, some people turned state's evidence. 2 defendants, Horace Dole Barnett and James Jordan, which went and described the events of that night, including the confession from Cecil Price to law enforcement and the contacting of Edgar Ray Killian, a Baptist minister, and the Grand Dragon for the local Ku Klux Klan. Killian had ordered the Klan members to gather in Philadelphia, and that Price released the civil rights members from the jail to the Klan's members and ordered the Klan's members to follow them in their cars. Eventually, the men were stopped on Highway 19, where James Jordan shot Cheney, Wayne Roberts shot Schwerner and Goodman, and the killers drove the core vehicle station wagon containing the bodies to the Old Jolly Farm, where they buried them in the earthen dam using a bulldozer, and then torched the cars. After the jury deadlocked on the decision, their decision. Judge Harold Cox employed the Allen charge, which is a jury instructions given during a hearing jury, telling them that y'all need to get shit together. You need to come to an agreement. Like, we're not doing this. You need to figure out whether they're not guilty or guilty. You need to figure it out. Basically what that means. On October 20th, 1967, the 7 defendants were found guilty for murder on civil rights charges, for the murder of civil rights workers in Mississippi. This marked the first ever conviction in Mississippi for such a crime. However, the jury was deadlocked on the convictions of 3 defendants, including Edgar Ray Killian. The prosecution decided not to retry the case, so Edgar Ray Killian was allowed to walk free, even though he was the mastermind behind this entire thing. When they talked to the jurors lately, they thought that it was not right to send a minister, a pastor, to jail for the rest of his life. Come on, bro. What we doing? What are we doing? What are we doing? Anyway, those who were found guilty were given sentences between 3 to 10 years, and none of them served more than 6 years in prison because Mississippi. The outcome of the trial just exacerbated public sentiment throughout numerous people who were involved in the murders. There were numerous people who were involved in the murders. Only a very few, only 7 were convicted, and their sentences were relatively light. The disparity between the brutal crime and the punishment sparked national outrage. The evidence of racial bias in the justice system was a catalyst for public demand for legislative change to combat the deeply ingrained inequities. In 1998, Jerry Mitchell from the Clarendon Ledger published an interview with Samuel Bowers. I just talked about him. In an interview, Bowers stated that Killian was the principal agitator in the Mississippi burning case. His role, however, had remained in the shadows since he had walked free from the original trial due to a hung jury. Upon publishing this information, Mississippi Attorney General Michael Moore announced in 1999 that they would renew investigation into the cold case. This investigation led to the Attorney General, led by Mississippi's new Attorney General. It looks like he had an outgoing Jim Hood, to get involved in rigorous scrutiny in the case, and became a symbol of systematic hatred and violence in the nation that they were hoping to leave behind. Yeah, whatever. It's Mississippi. They don't believe that. The case was reinvigorated by the social and political shift that had occurred over the several decades. Finally, 2005, the Neshoba County grand jury indicted 80-year-old Edgar Ray Killian for 3 counts of murder. The subsequent trial attracted national attention, with the court hearing powerful testimonies from people like Michael Schwerner's wife, Rachel Bender, among others. Killian, now in a wheelchair, did nothing but deny his involvement. The court, however, convicted him of manslaughter in June 21st, 41 years to the day of the murders, and he was sentenced to 60 years in prison. And he did appeal to the Mississippi Supreme Court in 1997, but they upheld it, and he died in prison in 2018 in Mississippi State Penitentiary. So anyway, this brings us to this point. These murders marked a turning point for the civil rights movement. It brought it shined a light on what was happening in Mississippi, because at that time, a lot of people, especially people from the North, thought, one, that they could come down here and change what was going on in Mississippi without consequence. And they really didn't know how bad it was. When you had things like Emmett Till and Mississippi burning murders, and God, his murder was just recently. I can't remember his name. They shined a major light on what was happening in Mississippi, but also murders like these began to radicalize a lot of the student movements, which would eventually turn into the Black Power movement. One of the huge problems with the Freedom Summer is that many of the Black activists involved, especially in Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, felt like white people were way too involved. They were not only like members, but they were running the show, and many of them felt like this wasn't their fight, not for you to be in charge. So what you would see is that you wouldn't really see too many huge interracial movements moving forward in the movement, but also a lot of people. There was a definite movement towards against or rejection of this nonviolent movement, because people felt like, if you're killing us, how can I stay nonviolent when you're not violent towards me? The people are dying. I'm dying. We're getting shot. And that really came to a head after King was shot. That was what led to like the explosion of the Black Panther movement, and the Black Power movement was already coming to fruition. But once that happened, it was like, let's go. Let's go. Let's do this. Anyway, that is the Mississippi burning case. I always enjoy talking about that. Like, if you do these kind of cases, you find that there's always this huge disparity on what happens with these cases and then how long it took to get justice. It would be a person is murdered in the mid 60s, and their killer would go free for 40 some odd years until like 1990, when they would then circle back and say, oh yeah, by the way, by the way, we fucked up. And if had they not had they had a hung jury in the Emmett Till case, I'm sure they would have done the same with his case. Unfortunately, those people were found not guilty, so they couldn't, because of double jeopardy, come back to that. But still, they tried to find ways, and I think his mother tried to petition Eisenhower and Hoover to try to get kidnapping charges, because ironically, while murder is a state charge, kidnapping is a federal charge, and she wanted to bring kidnapping charges against the murderers, and they declined. They would decline to prosecute. Anyway, I'm gonna start taking questions. We can shoot the shit for a while. Let me know if you like this format. I'm kind of just seeing what kind of works. I had been taking questions, but I didn't really get anywhere with it. So I was like, well, I'll just talk about a story, something that happened in the media during this time that's connected to Black history. We'll just see where it leads us. So if you hate it, it's okay. If you'd like to ask more questions, that's cool too. Yeah, I'm glad. I'm glad that you enjoy. I'm glad you enjoy these videos. I enjoy doing them. I sometimes I like to try to see if I could branch outside of Black history a little bit. I don't know. You probably can see this, but I don't delve too much into the Black diaspora, because once you start getting too far outside of Black history this is mine. This is mine to discuss. But once you delve like too far outside of that, it gets, hey, this is not my history. So if I get it wrong, like I'm not just disparaging me, I'm disparaging another group, and I don't want to do that. I never want to do that. So even though I'll see interesting, because there's this super interesting story here in North Carolina about how the local Lumbee Native Americans fought the Ku Klux Klan and beat their ass. I would love to talk about it, but like, it's not really my way. That's not really my way. I kind of want to pass that to someone else. Anyway, so yeah, we could talk, take questions. You guys can show up in the chat. I don't know if LL Cool Lakers ever asked me what he wanted to ask. So it's okay. It's all right. We'll give it a couple minutes. If nobody has anything to say, we'll go ahead and land this plane talking about Mississippi burning. There were a few moments in Black history from this week. I have not written any of them down. I will say that I think yesterday was the retirement of Thurgood Marshall. He retired in 1999, stating that basically he was tired. I mean, Thurgood thought that this was going to be a lifetime appointment, but his homie Judge Brennan had retired shortly before that, and the court had become increasingly right wing, and he was just like, he felt isolated. They were already calling him the great dissenter even before Judge Brennan had quit. I mean, had retired. So he was like, man, I don't want to stay here by myself. And I'm 80 years old and my health sucks. So he bailed. And then when he bailed, of course, Daddy Bush nominated Clarence Thomas. And while there are no direct quotes, because Thurgood was a nice guy, he wasn't going to directly call him a bitch ass nigga, even though he felt it. He felt that in his spirit. Publicly, he would say no comment, but privately, he was like, I don't like that dude. Don't like that dude. And he felt like he stood against everything that he had worked so hard for. And that it's just not my way. I'm not gonna, I don't like that dude. You know, he felt like it was a reversal of everything that he had worked for. And he done a lot up until that point. Like, you know, Thurgood Marshall had tried, I don't want to say more cases than any person in US history, but he was close. He's up there probably top five. And then he worked for the federal government as the Solicitor General, where he was the uh, chief attorney for the federal government that argues cases before the Supreme Court. And then, like 3 years later, Lyndon B. Johnson um, tapped him to be on the Supreme Court. Like that's a big deal. That's a huge leap from someone who was trying civil rights cases, maybe 10 years before that, to now I'm hearing those same cases. So it was a big deal. I'm always a big fan of Thorogood Marshall. I was a big fan of his work, because when he argued Brown versus the Board of Education, had he lost, he probably never, it would have never gotten done. It would have never gotten seen again. They would have never circled back on it. So anyway, I'm not going to hold you guys. It's been nice talking to you. I'm trying to continue to make this a more regular occurrence. Whoa, I did not see it. I'm glad to have you here. I'm glad to have you here. I couldn't see your question. I saw that some people asked about, said they had a question, but I couldn't see it. Um, I'm glad that you enjoy the stories. I try. One thing about doing Black history is it can get a little negative. It can feel a bit negative, but I try to not only do I sprinkle in positive stories when I can, or uplifting stories or happy stories, um, but um, I want to do stuff that at least, even in a sad story, has a positive spin on it. And one thing that you find when you do these stories on a regular basis, that it's this overarching spirit of uh perseverance, like through it all, no matter how bad. Like if you look at like Emmett Till's story, his mother worked the rest of her life to try to get justice for her son, and she would speak and she wrote letters to, like I said, to J. Edgar Hoover, and to I think it was Eisenhower. She wrote to Eisenhower. She would do speaking engagements. She was on it. And even after his death, like the reason why Emmett Till is as popular as he is today is because she wanted them to see what the world. She told, I want the world to see what they did to my boy. Because she had an open casket funeral, because she invited Jet Magazine's photographer to take pictures, and those pictures were then published in Jet Magazine, is why he so at the forefront, or he became like an icon for the abuses of during civil rights. He would have just been another name had she not done what she done. She's an icon in herself. Mamie Till Mobley. She's an icon in herself for what she had done, and how she continued to fight for her son, even though there's no happy ending to that story. It's all bad. It's as painful as a story can be, and yet she continued to fight and persevere. And I think that's something that we can all look towards. At least I try to. I don't have anything that sad, but if she could persevere, I can too. Anyway, um, thank you guys for coming out. Like I said, I'm trying to make it a more regular occurrence. I really enjoy having these talks. I'm just going to pick a subject. How about this? If I'm not picking a subject, you pick a subject. You tell me, what's up, bro? You tell me what you want me to talk about, and I'll do that too. I'll do research the story. I'll deep dive into it, and I can talk about that too. Right now, I'm picking the stories that I like. You might not like my stories. You might think Mississippi burning sucks. So, you tell me what you want to hear. You can reach out to me. Like I said up here. Oh man. Um, what was this part? I have not. I kind of talked about this a little bit. I I I just dabble in the Black diaspora. I've never actually went full fledged diving into um the whole idea of Western Africas and selling people into enslavement. And my and because of that, like I don't come from this from a point of being an expert, but my assumption if this was a plato or plomo type of situation. I don't know if you're familiar with that term, but it basically comes from like Pablo Escobar. It's basically like silver or lead. That's what it basically means. Get down and lay down. You either get on board with what we're doing and sell your captors to us, or we're gonna take you. You're gonna be on these boats. So you got to keep us fed, and in turn, we're gonna give you what you asked for. But if you're not coming up with enough people, you're gonna end up right here. You're gonna end up right beside us. That's this is my associate assumption. I have not dived too deep into it. I typically my foray into the diaspora and West Africa usually is like I did a lot of stories on foods, and most of those foods will come from Western Africa. Like when you talk about sweet potato pie, a lot of Western African cultures are yam-based societies. So when they got down here, they used what they had. They used what they had available to them, and then turned that into an amazingly delicious pie that became like the symbol, like the I'm here. We here. I'm here. So it's a funny story what happened with sweet potato pie because pumpkin pie and Thanksgiving as a whole was a Yankee holiday. They didn't like it. The South didn't like it because it was initiated around the time as we were leading into um, the Civil War. And Lincoln adopted the holiday thinking that it would bring people together. But the first thing, if your ops tell you, yo, we celebrating this holiday, the first thing you're gonna do is be like, nah, bro, we're not doing none of that. I'm not doing none of your Yankee holiday stuff. For a long time, they didn't celebrate. They didn't celebrate Thanksgiving. And even when they did start celebrating Thanksgiving, they didn't eat pumpkin pie because they felt like pumpkin pie was a Yankee dish. So what they did instead is they was eating what we was eating because we had an alternative. They started eating sweet potato pie that they had gotten from us as an alternative to that Yankee pie. Yeah, and that's what I had heard. I had heard also there was some payment being given to tribal leaders, but it was also this assumption that if I did not come up with the people, that they were going to take us, that it was going to be me. You know what I'm saying? That I had to give you something. And while we were exchanging the goods, it also like could be you on this table. It could be you on this boat. Could be you gone, which is also brings us because during Juneteenth, um, people would always mention about for those that chose to see, because we're talking about, what he was mentioning about people being sold into slavery and the Middle Passage and being disconnected from your homeland. And it's always this comment of for those that chose to see, but basically the people who decided that death was better than enslavement. And I love that line, but also that is a direct, talks directly. Like the most popular version of this was the Igbo landing where they were sold into slavery and was bought in Savannah. And as they were going up the Savannah tributary, they choked out their captives and killed them, and then grounded the boat and then marched into the water, drowning themselves. And for years in the Low Country, they thought it was some bullshit. They thought it was a lie. They did not believe them that this happened. And then local historians found evidence that not only did it happen, but that some of them actually didn't die. That they had local, slave captives go and fish some of them out of the water. Like many of them did die. But yeah, I love that story because I like to think that's what I would have done. Because boy, you're not getting me out there in that field. I went to Mississippi. I went to the Whitney Plantation and looked at some sugar plantations, and it was like 99,000 degrees outside. And she was explaining to me how you process sugar cane, how you cut that stuff down. I was like, bro, I'm not built for this. I'm not built. Like I'm dying now, and I'm doing nothing. I'm doing nothing. Doing nothing. Anywho, I've been shooting shit. All right. Every time you type something, it reminds me of something else. Another thing that's really interesting, because you talk about the Portuguese, this comments on the Portuguese also, is the term Guinea. So what's up, man? What's up from Baltimore? Is the term Guinea. So the origins of the term is, I think it's mentioned possibly from the Berber language, or from I forgot the other one, but basically it means like black people or black skin in the Berber language. Anyway, by the 16th century, the Portuguese sailors were calling people from this area of Western Africa Guineas. They were calling them Guineas. And then it basically meant anyone from that region, anyone of black skin was a freaking Guinea. So they were like, the whole area was Guinea. And then they would chop up into smaller segments. And now you would have, French Guinea, Spanish Guinea, Portuguese Guinea. I mean, I'll just say today those countries are now Equatorial Guinea and Guinea-Bissau and a couple other places. I think it's like one other one. Anyway, I mean all this to say we're going to circle back around to what this means for the Portuguese. Then you have Papua New Guinea, and the Spanish explorer who went to Papua New Guinea called it Papua New Guinea because the people that lived there looked like people from Western Africa because they were dark skinned. They looked like us, right? And then you have like Guinea coins and all that. In a diabolical turn, people started to refer to the Portuguese, the first people that found, the first people to call us Guineas. He would refer to people from Portugal and from Italy as Guineas as a slur. It was like, bro, this is a full circle moment that you're going to call me. You're going to call me a Guinea after I invented the word. Oh, man. Hey, I live in Charlotte too. Like, bro, that's what's up. I live in Still Creek. I live in Still Creek, right on the border. Right on the border. That is what's up, man. We might have to get up, man. We might have to get up and chat. Like, no, for real though. Hit me. Hit me offline. I would love to talk to you. Anyway, so yeah, I be running out of stuff to talk about. I get to about 45 minutes and I don't have nothing. It's always great to see you guys. I don't do this enough. I be feeling sometimes like I should do this every single weekend, but then I get busy. I had to come home just to do this. And sometimes also, like I like to think about possibly branching outside and doing other things and doing other pursuits. And I don't know how I could ever do that. I would love to do something that involves comic books. I don't get a chance to talk about comics, even though I read them on a pretty regular basis. And also, I'm trying to formulate how I would like to do something about people who are morally gray. Like, I still want to do black stories, but I would love to do people that like aren't always particularly positive, you know. I would like to do those stories, but I don't want to do that stuff on one mic. I feel like that would be off brand for me. But when you talk about um, person like Frank Lucas, I like that's an interesting story. I want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about it here, but I would like to talk about it in general. Maybe I might launch another channel. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how I feel about it. This right here in itself is a lot of work. Like the one like YouTube is okay. I don't mind YouTube so much, but the promotion outside of this because people expect things from you. Not the lives, but like they expect you to be on social media and have a presence. And I have a Substack and I'm writing for Substack. It's like, bro, this is a lot. This is a lot. Like the other day, a woman was like, "Hey, can you cite your sources on your notes?" And I don't mind citing sources. I got I got them coming out my ass. I got sources coming out my ass. But the idea of citing sources on a Twitter style note, like, bro, you're gonna have to take my word for it. I'm doing this every single day. I'm putting out notes every single day, and you want me to cite my sources? That's exhausting. I'm tired today. I work. I work. Anyway. Oh, my people, I love talking to you guys, man. This is one of the highlights of my week, man. It's always so generally positive. And one of the things that I kind of dreaded, my fear I had was that this is going to be overly negative. And but every time I do this, man, it's so positive. You guys are always great. And this is why I love it. This is why I love it. It's why this is always one of the highlights of my week of doing this. So in the future, if there's a story that you'd like for me to do, if you stories you'd like me to talk about, my man A2 Max, I am going to look more into the Black diaspora and the selling of slaves by our people. I know that it happened. I mean, because hey, the history is what it is. It's the one thing for me that you'll learn from me that if I'm not going to shy away from the truth in a story. I'm not going to shy away from the truth in the story. And I love to tell us that, they are who they are. Like I feel like these stories are better when the people are humanized and relatable more than any other. Like when you have somebody like Martin Luther King, you put him on a pedestal, you make him seem like he's mythologized and he's like a magical person. Like how does that help us today? How can I look up to a person when he seems like near God? Like that's not. I need him to feel like a person, a real person. So I like telling stories as truthful as possible because it give us hope when they feel realistic. Even though, man, sometimes I read about stories about Malcolm X. I was like, bro, you had some will. You had some will on you. You was never late. You didn't drink or smoke at all. You didn't do nothing. Man, jeez. What they say is a man above reproach. Like that's a tough act to follow. Anyway, I'm talking you guys head off. I'm gonna do this every other week. I like, God, man, boy, you come in something. We talk about Black heroes, and I feel like there are so many people from Black history who we look towards and we don't give nearly enough credit. So like my heroes are almost universally people that we would have probably overlooked and not given their due. Because when you talk about like the first thing first thing white people will talk about, they'll tell you about Martin Luther King. But I was like, Martin Luther King was not had a huge support system. Like, who would Martin Luther King been without Bayard Rustin talking him down from getting a handgun permit, or pointing him the way towards fully embracing nonviolence? Like, like, like those guys deserve the exact same recognition, and like those people are my heroes too. Or somebody like a Shirley Chisholm. When I was younger, I thought that Shirley Chisholm ran for president just because it had not been done before by a Black woman. It was only later that I found out that she was a deadly serious politician, and the only thing that was holding her back was racism and sexism. She would comment that she got more stuff from from the men that look like her than she did from white folks. Like that's the kind of people that I want that I want to give, to shine a light on. This is why I started my channel. I wanted to shine a light on people who had not gotten, who don't get their due, who might not get their due, or stories, or maybe I just find something interesting that I did not know. Like the other day, I was reading about how the word soul came about, like how we became, soul food, soul brother, soul sister, soul train. Where did that come from? And that idea came from the fact that it was like a point, it was like a term of honor towards people, kind of like you would be brother and sister in church. Soul brother, soul sister was like a term of endearment towards each other. And it was only into the 50s, into the 60s, that it became commercialized. And then you would get all of these offshoots of soul, like soul combs and soul t-shirts and soul food, soul train. All those things happened after we made it popular. And I'm not saying this was like some kind of commodification by white folks. I kind of feel like this is probably a bit of us, because soul food and soul train those were terms that we had. But that idea is dope to me. I love stories like that. We could talk about people and how we got here, how that became a thing for us. So I'm gonna try to do better. And if you have any suggestions, or if you have a video with me to do, like my man A2 Max, I would love to hear your ideas. I'm always open. I got I got scripts sitting on scripts waiting to get processed. I'm always in for another idea. I'm always writing things down to get ideas for new stories. Anyway, I'm not going to hold you guys. It's been 52 minutes. I love this. I'm going to continue to make this a series, even if it's just, I think it's 16 to 20 of us. I don't care. I'll sit here and talk to you guys. What was you said? Jump in. Oh man, I love the food history too. I'm big on the food. I also love the Panthers. I want to do an updated series, because I did the one I did on the Panthers was like one of my early ones. I want to do another one, a updated one on the Panthers, just because I love it. I love the Panthers so much, especially Fred Hampton. But I love the Panthers, the idea of the Panthers in general, and how they started out as a very radical group towards once they exploded, they started adopting social programs and bringing in more women, and it's just a wonderful talk. It's a wonderful project. Yeah, I love that. They used to read. There's this book by Robert Williams that they read early on. They were reading Mao Zedong, Little Red Book, but they also read Robert Williams' Niggas with Guns, and he was a member of the NAACP here in North Carolina, and then was exercised from the group when he got kicked out of the NAACP because of, after some violent upright, because they were doing a whole nonviolent thing. He was like, "Yo, we need to meet him where he at. We need to hit him guns with guns. Say, hey, they want to pull out guns. I got guns too." And they were like, "Nah, bro, you can't say that. You tripping. And then you find out much later on, after Thurgood Marshall. It's kind of weird. I talked about glowingly about Thurgood Marshall, but he had a little snitchy moment where he would rat to the FBI, because he was an informant for the FBI, basically to keep the heat off of NAACP. He was an informant for the FBI to keep the heat off the NAACP. And so all the fringe people, all suspected communists, the people like Robertson, like Du Bois, like Robert Williams, who wasn't a communist, but he was fringe. It was like, yo, I need you to go look at my guy. Go look at homie. Go look at homie. And that kept the heat off of them. And it also put him in the graces of J. Edgar Hoover. I kind of talked about the idea that I figured that the reason why he would have been a prime candidate to be the Supreme Court justice is because he'd already been vetted. They knew that he could trust him because he was already working and had been working as an informant for them for years when he was with the NAACP and their legal defense fund. Anyway, Robert Williams had that sort of thing going on, but he wrote a great book called Niggas with Guns. It's basically, talking about, hey, arm yourselves, and they use that as the basis for the very beginning of their movement, where they was out in Oakland patrolling the streets against the Oakland PD, because they had open carry laws at the time with the guns. Like, yo, like don't get crazy. I find that to be terrifying. Could not be me. Could not have been me. But I admire their gumption because that's scary talk. Um, and while they were doing that, not only were they getting the attention of the Oakland PD, but they were getting the attention of legislators in California and J. Edgar Hoover. Everybody had heard about him. J. Edgar Hoover had put him on their watch list. He called them, what did he call them? Negro agitators. That's what they called them. And then um, the California legislature was like, yo, we can't have you doing that. So they banned, they put together, they called the Mumford Act. They put together a package to ban open carry in the entire state because black folks armed themselves. And this is the one only time in history that the NRA was for gun control when your black ass had guns. Now all of a sudden it's too much. This is scary out here in these streets. So the Panthers showed up. They showed up to the hearing, knocked in the door while they were discussing the Mumford Act, while he was up there. And he was like, yo, see what I'm talking about? They crazy. They got guns in here. They got guns today. And they kicked him out. And that's when they went to the front of the steps and was like, yo, yo, I think they announced their 10-point plan and talked about what was going on. And then they got in their cars and they left, and the police followed them and they arrested them. But the Mumford Act after that was a wrap. It was a wrap. That was happening. That was absolutely happening. And it was signed into law by Ronald Reagan. Of course it was Ronald Reagan. He was the governor of California at the time. Yeah, he was the governor of California at the time. Trash. The whole shit was trash. Whole shit was trash. I love that. I love that story because it's so crazy. Of course, that's how they do the Panthers. But anyway, it ended up working a bit in their favor because they were at the time were seen as a bit of a fringe group, and it was hard to get the support of the moderates, which is what they needed. This is the whole idea that the FBI were trying to do. Not only did the FBI want to cut off, because they were trying to prevent the rise of a black messiah. This is how Fred Hampton got killed. But they were also trying to isolate the Black Panthers from the moderate base. They did not want you getting support from white moderates or moderate blacks. They wanted you to look like a fringe group and going around and carrying guns and monitoring the police. The police was not. That's a tough pill to swallow. So when they started doing social programs and an attempt to soften their image and their free breakfast program like that, that's exactly what the FBI hated. So the FBI was like, would come in and poison their food and lie on them and all kinds of stuff in an attempt to discredit the Black Panthers. They weren't shit. J. Edgar Hoover was trash. He was trash. Anyway, we need something like that today. We need the Panthers today. 2025 Black Panthers. Anyway. Thank you guys. Oh, no. Oh, yeah. It does sound familiar. Very, very familiar. I wonder where we heard that from. Thank you guys for coming out. I'm not going to hold you. We made it to an hour. I am proud of myself. If you like to see stories, join my Substack. I post notes every single day. I talk to people every single day. You can, if you want to converse with me, this is where I am most of the time in between going live and creating videos. I'm mostly on Substack so that you can reach out to me. I think they have a chat. I don't use it, but hey, maybe this is a reason to use it. Also, of course I have a channel. You can see that down below. All that social media stuff that I don't like, that I really don't care for, that I'm in and out of because it's work. It's extra work. I really just want to tell history, talk about history and go to bed, right? Talk about history and go to work and hang out with the family. That's about it. Anyway, thank y'all for coming out. I love you all. Check out my Substack. Go check out the webpage. And if you have any suggestions, feel free to reach out to me. I love having new video suggestions. I love hearing about stories that I had not heard of. And peace.